So, Christopher Myers is the acclaimed illustrator of many award winning books as a solo creator or with others, including several co created books with his father, Walter Dean Myers, as well as other books like Firebird and a host of his own books. And so, it's quite accomplished. So, Christopher is also an accomplished fine artist. His children's book imprint, Make Me Your World, will be publishing books starting this fall, and we are excited for another book publisher that champions diverse voices. So please welcome Christopher. Thank you very much for coming.
Anytime. Hey, y'all. One of the strange things about working in Kids Lit is the diversity of an audience, and what I mean by that is we got homeboy here. How old are you? We got 8 months, and we have many more multiples of 8 months. So it's odd when you try to figure out, like, how do I talk to that group of people? I'm mostly going to direct the conversation to you, kind sir, because 8 months is real. That's like a real amount of time to have dealt with the world. But I think that there are. I'm going to try to do like a little thing where we'll talk a little bit about what I'm trying to do, and then you guys can help me. Because one of the main reasons to come out into the world and talk to people, all right, most authors, illustrators, writers, you're essentially like in your house working all the time. You have about 3 friends, and those friends are mostly over text message, right? So what's nice is you come out into the world and you get to meet people and talk to your market. That's you. You're my market, right? And you get to talk to parents, and you get to talk to children and educators, people who have a vested interest in what we do, which I think is a super important thing. And we get to talk about what books do we need to see in the world. What has changed for me in the last number of years is that I'm a little bit on the other side of the coin, in which I'm publishing as well as writing and illustrating myself. And I've realized how few publishers kind of do this thing, to say, hey, y'all, what books do you want to see? And ideally, what I'd love to do is come out here and steal your ideas. I'd like you guys to tell me what you think needs to be done in the world and find a way to get that done. Understood and clear? And what we can do is maybe I'd love to be, there's a few enough people here that I'd love to like open it up, and we can maybe make this more a discussion. I would like you to start, because 8 months, again, that's all good. It's all good. But like, what are the books that we want to see? And I think that we can build a conversation from that. What are the books that you feel like that you haven't been able to find for your kids? What are the books that you are looking for that you're wondering, that seems like a no-brainer? Why isn't that already there? Anyone? Or is everybody in the bookstores being like, these books are all from my children. This is amazing. Jerry Craft. Yes.
I have 2 sons.
Mm-hmm.
But I always want to see kids of color in books as the heroes where nothing bad has happened. This is like the big expression of kids.
Okay, so we want to see books in which young people of color feature, but it's not necessarily about the tragedy of their lives. And I find that that's something that I see so often when people, I first said I'm going to have an imprint. People sent me lots of books about the very sad things that they could think of, right? They were like, and it's so hard to be a little kid of color, or it's so hard to be a little girl, or it's so hard to be a little, all types of things. I'm going to ask one of the experts, is it hard to be you?
Not so much.
Not so much hard to be you. Are there days when it's at least challenging? I mean, if we're going to make a book about you, would it just be like pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this is from an expert. We realize that people don't like to think of their lives, and we don't think of our lives very often as being about a set of endless challenges, right? And so how then do we tell stories that are challenging, that are fun, that are interesting? Because you've got to have a problem in any book. One of the things for the young writers in the audience, you got to have characters and you got to have a problem. For example, if I had a book about 3 little pigs, let's say, and they were just chilling like you are, got juice boxes, just hanging out, would that be a good book? Why?
Because when the big bad wolves come, then they're not ready, and some books they say that they got eaten up.
So the big bad wolf, is that a problem? Yeah. So you need a problem. So that thing of that balance that we try to strike between we want to tell stories that include lots of folks, but we don't want to make who they are be the problem, right? What are other books that you feel like you want to see that you haven't seen?
So I always said growing up, oh, I don't really like sci-fi or I don't like fantasy, but I think as an adult, what I was really saying is I didn't see those stories as a kid with people that look like me. So I want to see more stories that feature, Black characters that are in supernatural or fantasy scenarios.
I thought that was very funny when you were like, the Black Mermaids t-shirt said, I really wasn't into sci-fi or fantasy. You're like, this is just documentary, the Black Mermaids that you know right now. But it's exactly that. This thing of we're interested in having stories that are as big as we are, as big imaginatively as we are. Everybody wants their kids to imagine large. And that's one of the gifts of fantasy, of sci-fi, of literature in general, is it gives your kid permission to imagine themselves as big as they can be. And that's one of the things that when we make books for kids, when we publish books for kids, we have to ask ourselves, what is the ceiling that we're placing on our children's imaginations? And are we placing a ceiling, when you do a book, let's say like, there's a book out there called Pinklicious. You've seen that? That's this like super, super gendered funny book that you're like, what is the ceiling on the, like, let's say a young girl's imagination that you make with that book? Are there other books that we want to see? Get into please get into the nitty gritty with me because I like this and also I can do something about it.
Same-sex parents.
Same-sex parents. There are very few books with same-sex parents, right? In terms of like the large, and I can probably name them all, which is always a bad sign, right? If I can name them, and I don't even read, I read a bunch of things, but if I can name them, that means that there's very, very few. And non-traditional families in general, I feel like none of us, there are very few people whose family trees look like this. Most of our family trees nowadays go like this. There's a little side step to the left. There's like, oh, that's my cousin, but it's not my real cousin, but it's my play cousin, but really it's my cousin. All right, never mind. And I'm interested in all of that, all of this kind of family structures that are more reflective of the family structures we see around us, which I think is an interesting idea, that somehow in our literature, we're doing work that doesn't reflect the world around us. Why? And that's an interesting question for me. Are there other books that you want to see? Is there a book that you want to see? Like, if you could read any book you wanted to read, and you can make it up, and you can have someone make it, what's the book that you want to see? You don't want to read any books? You don't have any books like that? All right, you think about it. I would love to see a book about sisters, maybe. Maybe sisters. Maybe one sister who's like wise and all-knowing, and one sister who is less wise and all-knowing.
Yes?
Quality
nonfiction, urban focused.
That's super interesting. There is an idea that whenever we think about diversity in children's literature, everyone goes directly to fiction. And there's a need for nonfiction. There are 1,000 kids like me who loved a fact book more than anything. Most kids reach a certain age where they become deeply annoying with facts. And I think that's also something that that when we think about this kind of like diversity in young people's literature, we need to think past the genre of individual stories. I really, really love that. Yeah, yes. What you got?
What book you want to see? Now she's into mermaids these days, but
All right, so mermaids. We got some mermaid connections.
I would like to see stuff that is like more culturally about us, so like nuances that make our cultures different. That is everyday for us, but for people that are not aware of it.
You know, outside every time is stinky.
Oh.
You'd like to see a book about the stink that just is outside by this beautiful but also stinky swamp. Yes, I agree with you. But also this idea of cultural nuance. One of the things that is kind of a mantra for me is that if you want to make something appeal to a lot of people, you get specific. There is this sense that dealing with diverse communities means getting painting with broad strokes and being universalist. And to be quite frank, I don't have time for that. And it's about the idea of getting specific. It's about the things that are everyday for us that brings stories to life, and that's very exciting.
I haven't seen that many books where it's a mixed race family where it's not the main point of the book. I've hardly seen any books about Filipino kids that aren't folk tales, and I very rarely seen if a kid's Latinx but it's like parents from two different countries, where it's like always like the family's an Ecuadorian family, but what if it's Ecuadorian and Colombian, or if it's also different Asian countries or different countries within, anyway.
So I love that, and I love also the deep New Yorkness of what you're saying, because like that was every couple growing up when I was a kid was like, oh yeah, they're one of them mixed marriages, Dominican and Puerto Ricans. That's just really, really hard. That being said, but the idea is that when we think about diversity, again, I think that the thing that we're coming up against all the time is we don't want that to be the problem. We don't want it to be about, mom is Chinese and dad is Dominican. Oh, goodness gracious. I fully agree with you. So yes. So I think that those are kinds of books that we need to see. What else?
I was just going to say, my daughters respond to one of the books that we have that's actually written by kids and it was compiled by the teacher, and it was a series of poems they did about body parts and why they love them. And they were very responsive to things written by children. And I don't think there's any reason we couldn't encourage children to do some publishing, obviously with supervision, but.
Absolutely. Maybe even without supervision. One of the things that I find super interesting in all of the debates in the industry about own voices, they talk about own voices. There are very few kids writing books, and I think there should be more kids writing books. Like I see those three back there, and I'm like, one of them should write a book. I don't know which one of those three should write a book. I see it's you. I understand. So what she said, I don't know if you saw, because you were looking at her. What she said was that she could write a book and y'all could not write books. That's what she had said. I was appalled. I would love to see all of your books. I believe in all of you, as opposed to her. She don't believe in y'all. Just making that clear. Yes.
Okay. So she has an idea about an alligator and a turtle, and they're really nice, but they're a little bit scared. and they're happy. So that's what she said. But I would also, in addition to that, because that's a great idea, love to see a book for boys and girls, starting at a very young age, like thinking like 3 or younger, around consent culture. So even what it's like to tell your grandparent that actually I don't want to hug right now, but like a high five is okay, and that it's okay to say that to your mom, to your dad, to any adult in your life. Like, I don't want to be touched right now. My body is my own. And starting that, because I think I see a lot of that a little bit later in life, but body awareness starts as young as 2 and 3, around that time when they start to separate and they're like, I'm not my mom's body anymore, I have my own.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I come from a really theory background, right? I went to school and did a lot of theory stuff, and I think that one of the things that people lose sight of is that all of this theory stuff, things like consent culture, it's basic real talk between humans. It's about the idea of conversations that need to be had, that are being had as we speak with little kids. And I think that when we sometimes people get a little afraid when they hear the theory terms for these things, but at the same time, these are conversations we want to have with our children. And the gift of children's literature across the board is that it's the only communal literature. Maybe that and religious books, right? It's the only literature that you share with people by practice. That what you do is you get a book, you open it up, and you share it, you read it to a classroom, you share it with your child. And so when I make books, when I publish books, what I think about often is, what is the conversation that you can have with your kid around this book? How can we use this book as a tool? That is what our goal is. And so when we think about a book like thinking about consent culture, I think that's really, really, really important. Other books that you want to see?
So I know we don't want to just have books that are focused on the struggle, but and I love all the historical greats that are well known, but I want to just see more books that talk about people that are less known, that have done incredible things. So more picture books about Ida B. Wells, more picture books about I could literally list 1,000 people.
Right. There are what I think we're finding across in this conversation, but I'm finding across the country, is that there are 100,000 books that need to be published. That every time a publisher says, I don't know what to be publishing or who to publish or how to get to this story or that story, you understand that they're just not listening. Because quite frankly, there are 1,000 heroes that are unsung. There are 1,000 ways of singing those heroes. There are 1,000 conversations that parents are desperate for a lever to open up with their children. How do you, I recently contributed to an anthology about the talk, right? When parents of color have to talk to their children, like my daddy did to me, about how do you interact with police? What's going to happen? But this kind of thing. People need levers to open up these conversations with their children. And that's what these books can be when they're done well. So are there conversations that you're having a hard time having with your kid? Let's figure that out. Are there ways, when you talk about the idea of books written by children, there's a conversation that you want to have with your kid about the idea that all of these books are written by raggedy people like the man standing in front of you, and you too can write a book, right? And so these are all the conversations that we're trying to have. It's exciting and it's daunting, the sense that we have a hand in this, that we can make that book that's as culturally specific as you're talking about, that we can broach questions of consent culture with very young children, and that we need to, because by the time oftentimes they receive that information, it's too late. That we realize that nonfiction is a gift that we give everyone to have a community conversation, right? This is why little kids get obsessed with nonfiction books, is because they can say something that actually has some import outside of the world of their heads, right? Are there other books that you need to see, that you want to see, that I need to make or that you need to make? And I mean this like, are you trying to make a book right now? And if you are, holler, I can try and publish it, that kind of thing. People sometimes ask, like, how do you meet an editor? I'm like, I'm an editor. Bring it.
I'm trying to make books, and I want to talk to you about them.
Please do. And that's the, what I'll leave you with before, if you have any questions about anything I do. I've done about 25 books for young people, mostly focusing on people like me, New York, black kids, mixed kids who are running around New York being all the New Yorkness that we are. Holler if you have any questions about anything, but any questions about publishing, anything. I'm super open. One of the things that I really have stressed about in the past, I was on a panel, and they were like, someone raised their hand, they were like, what do I do? How do I publish a book? And then someone says, well, first you should perhaps find an agent and blah, 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 blah. We don't need that many hurdles. There are people in the world who can help you get this book done. So let's do this. But are there any questions? Can you tell me about what your book is that you were so much better than them about? I would love to know about your book. If you're going to come out and just be like, they can't write books, I mean, that's how you said. You seem pretty confident. I'm just saying. I'll listen to it later. Yes? Right. Okay, so to be very real with you on it, the line is almost non-existent, okay? There are lots of people who will give you lots of advice about what constitutes young adult versus adult work. My own guideline is this. If you have a young adult in your life, or you were a young adult at one point, which maybe a lot of us were, not yet some of y'all, I don't know, but think about, was this a conversation you needed to have? And to be very real with you, there's still debate about this all the time. Every book that comes across my desk, I have a little argument with my editorial team, with the publishing team, to say, hey, I think that this book is necessary. I think this book can be useful. And if you think the book can be useful to some young person out there, then keep pushing on it. I mean, there are some other guidelines, like you shouldn't have. I'll tell you in the frank way that. Peace. Bye. I'll tell you in the frank way that I was told, you shouldn't have gratuitous various things without consequences. You can have gratuitous things, but they should have some consequences. Yes, sir. Oh, who I am? My name is Christopher Myers, sir. What, sir? I'm not preaching anything. I make books. Yes, sir. It's all good, sir. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes. I would love to hear about the book you want to see written.
Are you going to tell the man what book you want to see written? You can stand up on your chair and talk into the microphone. Yeah.
I
Want to hear about your grandma, right? You want to read a book about grandma?
You need to work on it some more? All right, cool. We all do. All right, y'all. Well, I'm very glad to have met you all, and I'm glad to, I conclude this service. And anybody if you have any other questions, ideas, things you want to talk about, I'm around for a few more minutes. I'd love to know about your book that you're trying to figure out. And there are 1,000 books that need to be published. There are 1,000 books out there yet to read. Let's all go get at them. All right. Peace out. Yeah, if you got some books for me to sign, I'll sign them.